Now on to the imperative, chapter 33. We've been dealing with the non-indicative mood verbals. We've looked at the subjunctive, the infinitive, and now the imperative. When you think of imperative, what comes to mind? This is the mood of command. Commands directed to individual people, items, or groups. Often we think of commands in the second person, and that's true with the Greek imperative, second singular commanding one person, or second plural commanding a group directly, you or you all, respectively, and third singular and plural, translated let him or let them. The present with the continuous aspect is translated continue or keep doing. If there's a negation involved, continue not doing. Aorist undefined, translated simply do or do not. And context will help us to determine meaning. Here's the general morpheme chart for the imperative. If you see to, te, to, son, you are nearly certainly going to be in the imperative mood. If to, te, or to, son conclude a word, think imperative. Same with sto, ste, sto, son. These will be the hooks by which you can grab hold of the word and know that you're in an imperative. And these will just need to be memorized. To and sto are third singular, second plural. Te and ste, third plural. To, son, and sto, son. This general morpheme chart can be identified in the imperative chart here with the present. We'll look at the second aorist and the first aorist also. But notice down the chart, beginning with second singular, that is the second singular ending. You continue or keep on loosing. To, third singular, let him loose. Second plural. Te, you all loose. And notice the asterisk there by the second plural in the active. It is the same as the indicative, and that's why the asterisk is there. If you look down at the second plural, another asterisk. Lueste. The indicative and the imperative are identical in the second plural for the active and middle, and obviously with the passive here with the present. And because of that, we need to rely on context to help us to determine the meaning. Notice the full pattern then. To, te, to, son. Sto, ste, sto, son. And then with the passive identical to the middle for the present. Sto, ste, sto, son. Second aorist. The second aorist and present endings are identical. Notice them. To, te, to, son. Sto, ste, sto, son. Until we get to the passive. And here the passive has, other than the second singular, a reflection of the active. To, te, to, son. You see that? So the second aorist, third singular, second plural, third plural, are the same as the active endings. To, te, to, son. But here we have the tense formative eta to help us remember that we are in the second aorist. So we have the second aorist root, and then the second aorist stem rather, and then the tense formative eta and the endings. So down the chart, second aorist, to, te, to, son. Sto, ste, sto, son, things are fairly normal. But then in the passive, T preceded by that eta. And that eta will signal for us that we are in the second aorist. It's the second aorist tense formative. And then the participle, or rather, excuse me, the imperative morpheme, T, to, te, toson. First aorist, you'll notice here that we have the sigma and the alpha in most of these rows for the second aorist column, signaling for us that we are in the first aorist. Second singular just has son against an irregular, but if you have son at the end of a word, you're most likely in first aorist active imperative second singular. So down the column, son, to, te, toson. Psi, a bit of an irregularity here, because psi, you have just learned in the previous chapter, is also the first aorist active infinitive. So the first aorist active infinitive and the first aorist middle imperative second singular look the same, and context will help you to determine meaning. If it's an infinitive, obviously there would be a verb it has to connect to in the indicative, or a participle that it could be related to. And in the first aorist middle imperative, it would just function as a command, and it could be independent. Following then, third singular first aorist, sto, ste, stoson. And then notice the regularity between the first aorist and the second aorist in the passives, t, to, te, toson. But notice what distinguishes first aorist from second aorist in the passive imperatives. First aorist has the theta, eta, tense formative, while the second aorist just has the eta. I want you to stare at this chart for a moment, because imperatives can be a bit fuzzy at first, but let's go back to the principle of beginning with what we know. Let's walk in the light as long as we can before we start walking toward the darkness, if you will. We know that the first aorist passive uses theta eta as the tense formative. We know that the second aorist uses eta. Well, here's the same principle. What we need to memorize then is the pattern of the imperative morphemes, and that the aorist passive uses the same in the third singular, second plural, and third plural as the actives, to, te, toson. And then the middles all the way across the board, and the present passive, sto, ste, stoson. There's a bit of similarity, obviously an ending again between the present and the second aorist in the imperative morpheme. Going down the chart or down the columns, they are the same. E, to, te, toson, u, sto, ste, stoson, until we get to the passive. And at the passive, there's a distinguishing feature between the present and the second aorist, which the second aorist again resembles the first aorist. So begin to follow these patterns, recognizing that there are similarities between the present and second aorist, and between the second aorist and first aorist. In some ways, if you can memorize the second aorist, that middle chart there, you'll have, or the middle column, you'll have links with the present in terms of the imperative morpheme all the way down until the passive, and with the first aorist, a link with the passive imperative morpheme. This will just need to be memorized. Here we're just classic learning Greek. We just must memorize. Prohibition and negation, as Mounts notes, there is a continuum of how the Greek language can prohibit or negate an idea. Simply just using "u" with the future indicative. You see the example from Romans 13:19. The "u" and then future indicative of verbs. One step further, if you will, stopping a continuous activity. And here we begin with the imperative, may with the present imperative. From Matthew 6:25, let not your soul be troubled. A troubled soul is something that many of us would have, and let that not be the case. It's a continuous kind of activity, so must be stopped continuously, must be stopped repeatedly. Keep on not worrying is the idea. The aorist imperative, stopping an undefined or theoretical activity. Do not let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Or rather, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing here. It's a theoretical activity, just a one-time idea, but once in a holistic sense. A theoretical idea. Next, stop and be warned. This is a heightened level of prohibition or negation. And you'll notice that these final two use the subjunctive. May with the aorist subjunctive is stop and be warned. Do not think that I came to destroy the law and the prophets, Jesus says. And finally, the perhaps strongest negation or prohibition in Greek is ou me with the aorist subjunctive. So notice that we begin with the future indicative, just a simple do not do something. This is Paul's list of restating some of the Old Testament commands in Romans 13. A bit stronger, stop a continuous activity, may with the present imperative. Stop an undefined theoretical activity, may with the aorist imperative. Stop and be warned, may with the aorist subjunctive, and not on your life, ou may, plus the aorist subjunctive. This then sets out the continuum of prohibition and negation. Imperatives are right in the middle, but it's subjunctives that we noted a couple of chapters back that provide the strongest of the negations in Greek. Come back to the imperative chart. This is what needs to be memorized and worked on. And as you do, you will find success in the Greek imperative.